Welcome to the Huntington Way Show, where we help parents navigate the educational maze. I'm your host, Yvonne Strachan, author and founder of InspirationalHomeschooling.com. And I am talking with Dr. Douglas Pietersma. He is the researcher of the National Home Education Research Institute and professor at Regent University. He also is multilingual. So we are going to be talking today about teaching your child a foreign language. Why and how? Show is brought to you by the Huntington Learning Center and Inspirational Homeschooling. You're listening on Power Talk 1040 AM, 98.5 FM, and 95.7 FM. Please like and subscribe to Power Talk 1040 on YouTube. Welcome to the show, Douglas.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So, as a multilingual person, what are the benefits of teaching a child with foreign language?
Well, there are so many benefits. It's really hard to boil them down to something simplistic, uh, but there are positive influences that range academics, that range life skills that a student can get when they incorporate foreign language. This is really why, because studies have shown that foreign language is so beneficial, that most schools require it as a graduation requirement. Some colleges require it either for entry or for graduation in their baccalaureate programs or things of that nature. Students, when they have that foreign language background, they can often incorporate a broader range of vocabulary and understanding. Working even with my son and him studying Spanish, and then he goes to his etymology course and he's starting to get the connection between the Latin words because he learned something in Spanish and he's drawing those connections together. I can just see that benefit really coming out in his academics, even in pronunciation. So, with a child who has a speech impediment, being able to give them a broader range of sounds that they need to make and be able to enunciate. There are just so many benefits. I would say this, though, as a Christian family, the biggest reason I would have the biggest benefit for teaching a foreign language to your child is that both you and your child, perhaps you're learning with them or perhaps you know it already, have an expanded opportunity to be a witness and a testimony for Christ. If you're going to learn something like a foreign language, I can't think of a better implementation for that, a better practice, a better uh, homework, if you will, than to put that to use in some sort of a ministry service. So, yes, there are many benefits, and there are more than even what I was able to explain there. But I would encourage families to look out for opportunities, even as we talk today about how to implement that in home education.
No, that sounds great. So, how early should parents teach their child a foreign language?
So I would say start absolutely as early as you can. And when you think about teaching a foreign language, perhaps we remember our high school language courses or a college language course, and you're thinking about the academics, the books, the learning, the vocabulary drill, whatever. For younger for younger children, really all they need is exposure. If you take a child who was raised for 5 or 6 years in a foreign country, perhaps by American parents, but yet they had exposure to a foreign language, they will absorb a ton of that language simply by being around it. And many of us don't necessarily have that opportunity, but yet exposure is really the first thing that is needed in foreign language learning. So you can simply expose them to music that is done in a foreign language, anything that is read or vocal in a foreign language. Just having it around them. If you have friends who speak a foreign language, great to invite them over, have them speak to your kids. You'd be amazed what your kids can pick up, even as very small children. One of the main concerns, perhaps, is well, I don't want to confuse them as they start to learn English or as they start to read. But children are amazingly adaptable at being able to separate those things. And I have run into children that speak perhaps English and Spanish when a parent only speaks Spanish, and they may only be 5 or 6 years old, but they'll translate because they can differentiate between the two and they're usually very good at it. So I don't think there is a too early age to start foreign language learning.
Oh, yeah. So, how would you teach somebody very little foreign language, like 0 to 1 or earlier than 5?
So as children grow, of course, parents realizing their academic capabilities, this is one of the highlights of home education. We know when our kids are ready for the next thing, they can go from that exposure level to then a more I wouldn't call it formal academic instruction, but a more advanced exposure, perhaps reading something to the child in Spanish. And as a parent, maybe you don't know a language that you're trying to help your child learn. How can you do that with your child? Well, the first thing is you're going to learn. you're going to learn how to go through something and pronounce. Perhaps there are audiobooks out there, and there are, that you can use. There are dual language books that you can get at your library. There are pronunciation guides that can help you as a parent. I primarily work in Spanish, and the one thing I love about Spanish is once you learn how to pronounce the letters, they don't have as many confusing rules in Spanish, so you can learn how to pronounce things even if you don't know what a word means.
Hmm.
But there are also things that you can use to help. There are internet tools that you can use. Find a way to expose your child to more of the spoken, specifically as they can see it corresponds to a written word, and a young child will then start to pick that up. As they get older, you can get into more formal instruction. But again, it doesn't have to be a course. There are a number of language learning apps out there. Some of them are free, some of them have fees. I always encourage people, don't spend a ton of money because there are so many free resources out there. If you find one that you know for a fact that you're going to use and is going to be value added, fine, you can, if you want to, you can pay for a subscription or something along those lines, but get that extended exposure. There's a lot of different apps out there. You may try one, your child may decide that they don't like it, then you move on to something else. Get them exposed to it and engaged in the language. And then when they get to perhaps middle school, into middle school, high school level, they're probably ready for a more formal instruction. And there are plenty of courses out there that are self guided instruction. And if you as a parent do that course with them, they are more likely to learn, retain, and be able to use it. And of course, you as the parent, you're going to drill them, you're going to practice, you're going to throw it at them at random times in the middle of the day, and then they're going to be able to absorb more of that material. It's one of the things that I encourage in homeschool cooperatives is when there is perhaps a foreign language classes, don't just send the kids to the class to learn from a foreign language teacher. That's great, but parents learn it with them. Parents drill it with them. Even if you don't think you're going to learn it as well as they do, fine. I love nothing more than to see my children outlearn me in something, and that's an encouragement that we can take away from it. But we are an encouragement to them when we show them that we are willing to learn alongside of them.
Yeah, that's true. And then it gives you the opportunity to converse together and practice together as well.
Absolutely.
Yes. So, is it better to teach a child a foreign language through immersion or through structure?
So this is an easy question to answer, but it's a hard one to implement. The
Okay.
easy answer is immersion is best.
Hmm.
I had people many years ago when they found out that I spoke Spanish, they would come up to me with a question, what's the best way to learn Spanish? And I would say, move to Mexico. And they said, well, that's not an option. Well, you didn't ask me what your options were. So yes, that is best. And if you can ever have an opportunity, missions work, whatever, to immerse yourself in a language, absolutely. 100% the best way to do it. What's the best way to do it outside of that foreign culture immersion? The answer is as close to immersion as you can get. Exposure over time, especially even in small amounts, not necessarily huge chunks of time and time again, over and over again, that is what is going to help them learn. Again, you're not going to employ the structure until you know they're academically ready for that structure. When does that happen? Well, it's different. I've known 8-year-olds that were ready for grammatical instruction. I've known
Wow.
uh, teens, 15, 16, they still struggled with that because everyone's going to learn at different times, just like we learn to read at different ages. We learn to walk at different ages. We are ready for that formal instruction at different ages, but as a parent, you will know when that is. You'll be able to implement that with them. And if you do it with them, I guarantee there's going to be much greater success and usage than if they're set alone to do it and they don't have you along their side doing it.
Yeah. So, I'm thinking that what I'm hearing from you is that perhaps we should not be waiting to teach our children any foreign language. We should be immersing them and then looking for those triggers or those opportunities to then move into more and more structure.
Absolutely. The longer you wait for anything along this line, the higher the learning curve is, if you will, or the
Mm.
steeper the learning curve is, if you will. And so, yes, any exposure they can have as a child, as a youth, even as a preteen, middle school age, that is going to springboard them. If they have a baseline of vocabulary, if they have a baseline of pronunciation, when they start a formal academic instruction, they're going to pick up and run with it a lot quicker, maybe even than adults will. And sometimes they do that a lot better than adults do.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. When we come back, we're going to talk more in depth about teaching your child foreign language. I want to thank our sponsors, Inspirational Homeschooling and the Huntington Learning Center. Welcome back to the Huntington Way Show. You're listening on Power Talk 1040 AM, 98.5 FM, and 95.7 FM. I'm your host, Yvonne Strachan, and I am speaking with Dr. Douglas Pietersma. We are talking about teaching your child a foreign language, why and how. So, Douglas, how might a homeschool parent allot credit to high school students who learn a second language?
Well, there's a couple of different ways you can look at it. If you are using a course and a course is set out to be, for instance, a year-long, one-credit high school course, then you complete the course, whatever time it takes, you complete the course, that's the credit you're going to award. A lot of families use multiple sources, which I highly encourage. In which case, it may not necessarily be start and finish in a book course, if you will. And so, what I encourage them to do is simply track how much time they spend doing that. There are a couple of recommendations out there. One of them that I go by is the Homeschool Legal Defense Association's recommendation for high school credits being anywhere from 120 to 150 hours of work. And so, you can take everything that's done in foreign language learning, vocabulary drill, any kind of extra support learning that they do, apps that they use, formal curricular instruction, videos that they're watching, tally up the time. If it's over 120 hours, I would write it down as a full high school credit. So that's basically how I suggest parents track that and record it.
Yeah, that sounds great. So, what resources do you suggest a parent use to help their child learn a foreign language?
Well, the good thing is we live in a world where there are so many resources. It's hard for me to even list them all. But I will make a short attempt. There are obviously courses, books that you can get. A lot of people aren't going to learn, especially a foreign language, because you need to hear it, you need to speak it. You're not going to learn it straight from a book. So what are there? There's videos, there's video courses. Many you can buy, many are on YouTube for free. There are apps that you can get, which I think I've mentioned already. Apps, language learning apps that your children or yourself can employ to help build your vocabulary, to help strengthen your grammar knowledge. I would not look past a library. The libraries should generally, most good sized libraries have a foreign language learning section. It's going to have, well, back when I started doing this, it would have been tapes. Now it's CDs. It's probably beyond CDs. Now it's probably digital audio like MP3s, anything along those lines that you can get and use. What I encourage parents to do is as they try various programs, curriculums, find the one that you're going to use as a baseline. And a baseline curriculum is simply going to teach the language systematically, starting with the easier grammar, going to the harder grammar, starting with conversational, going into more in depth. Use that as your base, but don't ever take any course and say, this is it for language learning. Always supplement because there are so many supplementary resources out there. As I teach Spanish, even in a co op, we're covering a particular grammatical structure. I will tell my families, go out and find supplemental materials on that concept, review them. It's not something that I produced. Somebody else is going to teach it. You may understand what that instructor said better than you understood what I said, and now you've expanded your knowledge. There are so many resources out there. It's hard to make a comprehensive list, but it's easy because there are so many resources.
Yeah, and so you had mentioned earlier, maybe playing some movies or music or something like that. Is there any type of advice that you have around maybe watching a movie in a foreign language?
Absolutely. I use this as a supplement to specifically my son's Spanish language training. And we'll take a movie that he knows verbatim in English, and there's several of those that he has. And if they have a Spanish track, you can put it on the audio and listen to the Spanish track. And because he understands the context and what is said in English, he's going to be gleaning vocabulary and even starting to mentally put together grammar constructs that he otherwise wouldn't from formal instruction because he's heard it.
Yeah.
Also, many of these DVDs perhaps have a language track where it has the written language. I encourage parents not to do both at the same time because oftentimes they don't match. I also encourage that you don't have to necessarily do an entire movie at a time either. A great thing to do is to take perhaps 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes a movie. Listen to it once in your target language, then go back and listen to it again. Perhaps listen to it once through in English, and then go back and listen to it again in the foreign target language. In which case, you will absorb every time you listen to it more information, more vocabulary, and perhaps you hear a word and you don't know what it means. That's a good opportunity to use an online resource. Go look up the word, find out what it means, put it into your vocabulary rotation, and drill it until you know it.
Yeah, that sounds great. And so, would you recommend that they watch that movie over and over again over time?
We have done the same movie many times over. I would say my son's favorite is probably Kung Fu Panda.
Oh, that's
We use
fun.
it a lot.
So, how do you keep a child from forgetting that second language that they have learned?
Well, this is another question that's kind of easy to answer in the sense that I think most of us know the answer to retaining any information, whether it be foreign language, music instruction, or any other thing that we learn, we have to use it. We must practice, practice, practice. I teach my karate students practice, practice, practice. But I would say this is a good thing to keep in the back of our mind. It's not just about the sheer amount of practice. I would say that students are going to retain more information if they practice in smaller chunks, more times. So perhaps I want to do 30 minutes of practice in a week. I do three 10-minute segments as opposed to one 30-minute segment. For those of us who have been to college and we realize the myth of cramming and how that goes when it comes to, if you know that over an entire semester, if you study over an entire semester, you are way more likely to retain that data than if you study for an entire night before a final exam. Same thing goes with foreign language learning. Smaller chunks, but consistent, regular, as often as you can, but in smaller chunks, and a great additional amount of information will be retained by the student.
Now, do you recommend then too that you could move into high school and then maybe add on like a mission trip or a visit to that area?
Absolutely. If there is ever an opportunity that you have to put that training into practice, it is going to just not just reinforce what you know, but it's actually going to bring out what you know, but you may not realize you know. I'll give an example. I trained a group of people. We had 1 week, once a week Spanish class for 9 months before going on a missions trip. Mostly it was teenagers, older teenagers, young adults. And when they went on this mission trip, they realized that even after 1 week in country, they started conversing with their peers of their age in that foreign country. They were laughing and being funny with each other. And that was one of the biggest indicators to them that they realized they could communicate, even humor, which is a difficult concept in a lot of foreign language learning to communicate humor. But they could do that. And they realized that there was much more information in their head than if they had sat down to say, well, tell me everything you know about your foreign language. It wouldn't have been very much that would have come out. But then using it, it just comes out of nowhere, it seems like. And it really expands and blossoms from there.
Yeah, that sounds great. And so also when they're visiting that place, they would be immersed in the culture. And how would that impact their foreign language learning?
So a short-term immersion, it definitely has an impact. It's obviously not going to be as good as perhaps living a year or 2 years in that culture, but even a short time is going to have a positive impact. But just like any other learning, that positive impact will wane if it doesn't also come with practice and subsequent usage. So when you have that opportunity, make use of that opportunity and then use it as a springboard for the next level of learning or the next level of repetition to be able to reinforce what is learned previously.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so would culture also impact that? Because I imagine that other areas have different culture.
Sure. So culture is one of those things that I encourage parents to incorporate as part of foreign language learning. And I wouldn't even separate it out as like something separate, a different
Oh,
course or anything along those lines. I would actually teach it right along with whatever foreign language you're teaching. Many courses actually have like cultural elements. So for instance, if you're going through a textbook, there may be cultural segments that you would want to read. But again, as adults, we know we want to learn that. We can go out and learn it. We can go out and get books on a particular culture for a country or a language. A language like Spanish, well, is very broad in the number of countries that it's spoken in. So perhaps you want to focus on the culture of a very specific country as opposed to the language as a whole. But you can learn that. And then as you are teaching your children, not only does it help reinforce the importance of why you're learning that, but then it'll also bring certain concepts to mind as you teach them, grammatical concepts. Well, that's why that's important because of how the culture perceives something or
mm,
perceives certain words or how they are used.
yeah, that's great. So, Dr. Douglas, can you please share how people can find you?
They can find me on various social media, specifically on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. The handle is at Dr. Douglas Pietersma, except on Twitter where it's at Dr. Doug Pietersma. And I try to share encouragement to home educating families as much as I can on those platforms.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing about teaching a foreign language, something that homeschoolers want to know more about all the time, myself included. I express our gratitude to our sponsors, the Huntington Learning Center and Inspirational Homeschooling, for bringing this show to you. This is Yvonne Strachan, today's host on the Huntington Way Show, where we support you in educating your kids. Thank you.